All right, everybody. Doug Fowler here, Pulaski Talk / Show Me StreamCast down here in St. Robert. Running a little bit late today. We're going to kick it off here in a few minutes, so stay tuned with us and be patient. And we'll get the show going. So stay tuned and watch us talk behind your backs. Me and Brandon here are talking, chit-chatting, talking about how great the Iowa Hawkeyes are. So we'll be right with you. So just keep an eye out. If anybody's out there want to talk about the Lord of the Rings power, the Rings of Power, just let me know and we'll talk out loud and everybody can listen while we wait for Bill to get here. I'm going to turn it up so you guys can listen to us because we're having such a fascinating conversation. Lord of the Rings stuff until Bill gets here. So
I honestly don't think that anywhere in the lore the identity of the so the Witch King of Angmar it ruled over a kingdom
up north.
Up north in
Yeah.
North. So I don't think that is going to end up being a Numenorian.
But well, it shouldn't be anyway.
It shouldn't be, but they might change it. You know, they've obviously made changes to call back to things. But I thought season 2 was a vast improvement.
I thought Sauron was excellent. I thought the way they kicked it off, where he was putting the crown on, and Adar killed him with the crown, or not killed him, but destroyed his essence. So, yep. Once again, we're just waiting for Bill to show up. He's busy in court today. He's being a little late, so we're talking Lord of the Rings power, the Rings of Power. If you want to chime in conversation, call us up. I'll put you on the air at the number 573-408-0339. We can talk the Rings of Power while we wait for Bill to get here. I got my security cameras on alert in case he does show up on the wind.
Good. So
Yeah, I didn't like The Stranger.
Yeah, that was weak last season too. I will say though that I did like that they stopped doing in this season what they did the first.
There he
season.
is.
Hey, we got Bill.
We got Bill. We're going to put you on mute real quick. Stand by, folks.
Can I use your restroom?
Can I get a mic check out there? Anyone? Mic check? Mine's a little loud.
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. Well, we're waiting on Bill to get settled in here. Hello, everybody. I'm Doug Fowler from. Let me change my camera real quick to Show Me StreamCast here in St. Robert, Missouri. I want to give a quick shout out to our host, in particular, Prue Law Office down in Waynesville, Missouri. Mark Prue and the Prue Law Office. I've been sponsoring the show since the beginning, so we really appreciate you guys down there keeping the lights on here and letting us have our little fun here and talk about people and have politics and stuff. And also like to give a shout out to Regina Utley's campaign for sheriff. Regina Utley for Pulaski County Sheriff is also a sponsor and helping make sure the lights stay on around here and the microphones keep working. Scheduling updates for everybody. Sheriff's debate. This is Saturday at 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. 5 p.m. I'm sorry. Got Stacy Ball and Regina Utley coming into the studio or into the garage, one of the two, and we're going to have a debate. We may even throw a round of Jeopardy in there, so who knows? So we may get in there. There's Bill. He's coming on.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. I tell you, it's my fault.
Oh, you're muted, so nobody can hear you. They just hear rumbling. I'm doing my admin spiel. So.
Okay, cool. Great.
Amendment 3 discussion with Mr. Hardwick on Monday with Ms. Reeves also at the Village. I'll be there streaming live in the studio. District 124 candidates, Hallmark and Mayhew, may be coming in next week. I've in coordination with both of them to come in, so hopefully we can wrap this all up. And if I can get all four of them here to play a little Jeopardy, House of Representatives Jeopardy, I may be able to have all four of you come in one of these days before the election and have a little fun. So if you get bored, I'll let you know.
If I get bored, I'll let you know.
I'll see what I can do.
Okay. And with that, let me change my cameras real quick here. There we go. Just so you can see, this is what you see. Everybody's looking at you. Usually I have it on the screen, so no funky business.
Oh, no, I got you. You didn't put the cat filter on.
That's right, cat.
That actually might help me.
Brandon, you want to pull your mic a little closer, or you use?
Oh yeah, I can sit up a little bit.
There you go. First and foremost, thank you to our new guest today, Bill Hardwick, representative for District 121, which includes Waynesville, St. Robert. What other city?
Fort Leonard Wood, Devil's Elbow, and not Dixon zip code.
Right.
Not quite in Dixon city limits.
Okay. And Brandon Swartz, candidate, Democratic candidate for the same office. Thank you both for coming in today. What I'd like to do first and foremost, by way of introducing yourselves to the audience, Bill, if you're the incumbent, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, giving the audience a little background. Your main camera's right there if you want to speak into the camera.
Sure. My name is Bill Hardwick, a state rep. It's my 4th year in office. I got elected in 2020. Before I ran for office, I was a local attorney. I was a prosecutor. I worked for a Department of the Army on Fort Leonard Wood and spent some time on active duty before that, the Missouri National Guard. I'm from Pulaski County. Born in Rolla, went to Dixon High School, and then, like I said, joined the Army, went to AIT and Engineer Officer Basic on Fort Leonard Wood. Went to law school, went to Iraq. Did time active duty, and I came back here after law school and got a job as an assistant prosecutor, did that.
Right.
So this is kind of my home, and that's kind of where I got into office, too. I thought, well, there's nobody who I think is standing up for the way I want people to say things, standing up for it. And I think I can be part of the conversation to help kind of protect our community and make it better. So this is kind of where I'm from, and I love it, and I'm just really proud to be able to represent it.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. Can't hear the other guy, Brittany. Mike is very low. I can hear you good. So I'll turn the microphones up a little bit. Stand by. All right, Brandon, you're up.
All right. Hopefully they can hear me. My name is Brandon Swartz. I've lived in Missouri pretty much my whole life, except when I lived out of the country while I was in college for a little under a year. My wife and now I'm hearing just myself.
I just turned your mics up. That's all.
Okay. My wife and her family are from here. Her dad was a drill sergeant here at Fort Leonard Wood. When finished law school, there was a job opening here. Wanted to raise our kids close to family. Moved down here. We've been down here a little bit over 11 years. Love the area. Love the opportunity that Waynesville has given our kids. It's got the opportunity of kind of a bigger school like I went to when I was in the Kansas City area, while still having a small town feel.
Okay.
And so I've been working at the Missouri State Public Defender's Office, trying to help people that can't afford access to justice. So that's what I've been doing since I've been down here.
I didn't realize that was a state office. Is it not by the circuits or nothing like that?
So how it works is
just for my edification. I figure if I didn't know, somebody else doesn't know.
No. The state has a main office, and we have offices all throughout the circuits. And our office actually represents the entire 25th, and then we also represent Dent County.
Right.
And we have previously represented Crawford, and we might represent them again. It just depends on resources. Our office has been pretty low on staff over the last few years. Every Friday, we get a depressing email about how many job openings there are in the public defender system. And actually, right before I came here, I was at a goodbye celebration for another attorney we're losing to St. Louis.
Right.
So,
pride and nature of the game, I reckon.
It is, especially when they're young and don't have wife and kids to keep them here. I bought a house, and first kid started here in kindergarten. She's a sophomore at Waynesville now, and I don't really see a reason to leave. I love the area.
It's awesome.
But unfortunately, for younger people, it's harder to find places to fit in.
Sure. Thank you so much. Well, for the agenda goes, so everybody understands, the discussions will be upon various agreed topics, very broad strokes, no surprises, except for moderator's delight. I may throw some zingers in there just to get to see what the feel and to see how you react to it. If everybody can see the phone line, for area code 573-408-0339. Please wait till the end of the show if you can. But if you got an urgent question, ring us up. We'll answer the line. Bill's in charge of answering the phone because I can't reach it. It's that little flip.
Yeah, I'll take care of it.
But we can hear it. But if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to call. And remember, we're streaming on Facebook Live, Twitch, YouTube, and Instagram tonight. First and foremost, we're going to defer to the incumbent. Let him go first. Talk about economic development and job creation for District 121. What specific strategies do you propose for attracting businesses to District 121 and fostering job creation?
Okay, so to me, it's like 4 layers, right? So layer 1 is we've got this big interjector of our economy, which is Fort Leonard Wood, where the federal government spends a lot of money, and there are a lot of people who have either a relative in the Army or Department of Defense, or they have a company that contracts with the Army. They do business on Fort Leonard Wood, and then those folks definitely, they shop at the restaurant. They go to the restaurants. They shop at the stores. They buy gas. They buy goods here. So that's a big interjector of economy. So something I did since I first got elected is I try to get our federal delegation, our involvement, and I'm on the IMPACT, which is part of the Missouri Economic Development Department, but we go to work in the National Defense Authorization Act and with Congress and with our industry partners like Boeing, like Honeywell in Kansas City, and also our academic partners like S&T in Missouri. And our goal is to make sure that that is foremost protected as an economic driver and a federal government investment, and then talk about how we grow that and sustain that mission. So I can, and I'll talk about the other layers in a second, but if Fort Leonard Wood contracts or it dries up before we have an opportunity to have other, I call them drivers, and what I mean is other things that types of jobs people can have around here, Then we're going to see the decrease in our housing prices. We're going to see less spending and less GDP. We're going to see economic contraction in our area. So we don't want that. We want to be a growing community. So foremost, I want to sustain and grow Fort Leonard Wood. And it looks like there is some growth. There's progress about the basic training companies coming here. But then on top of that, statewide, we want a climate where I want to make it easy for somebody, like if somebody wants to start a podcasting business, or they want to start a home-based business, or they want to start any kind of business. The economy's changing from brick and mortar to online and Amazon. It's changing from, people have more service and information-based businesses now before, and database businesses. So we'll make it so there are fewer barriers. There aren't so many things that stop somebody from going, hey, I'm in school, or I'm a student, or I'm working a 40-hour job, and I want to start this business and hire people.
Okay.
So a lot of legislation I've had is trying to make it easier for people to start businesses and easier for people to hire. Instead of dealing with red tape and regulations from the state, we just want you to go and succeed, Right. So there's twofold things: making sure that our main things are here, making sure it's easy for people to dip in, and then in the long run, what we're trying to do is I go up. We had some folks from Washington University at St. Robert. We went over to Cancun Mexican Grill. And we were talking about partnerships they could have down here and satellite campuses. We go up and we talk to folks at Boeing. We talk to these industry partners. I visited with the folks at Amazon before they had the drop boxes there about more stuff to move here, more stuff that's here. So if there is a change in the DoD and the national economic cycle, we have more different things that people can do. So in the long run, that's the vision, is to have different economic instruments and more opportunities around Pulaski County.
Awesome.
But so that's kind of the general focus I've been doing. So
Thank you so much. Brandon, your turn. Same question. Let me ask it again. What specific strategies do you propose for attracting businesses to District 121 and fostering job creation?
So I actually agree with Bill on the first thing, that you can't ignore Fort Leonard Wood at all. Like that is the lifeblood around here. Just like Rolla has the college, we have the base. We definitely have to foster that partnership, make sure that it's not going anywhere. That also means, I know people don't like the federal government, but a lot of the reason that our schools are decent here, we've got DOD dollars coming in, we've got federal dollars coming in that other communities don't have, because of the federal government. So people have to realize when they're like, oh, I hate the federal government, they're actually a vital partner in our economy down here. And so, if we want to hurt the federal government, I'm not saying they're perfect.
Sure.
Making sure that they want to be in this community, and making sure that Missouri is a good place for them to be. Unfortunately, right now, I think that there are some things that statewide policy are affecting the desirability of Missouri being a place that people want to come to. And the Army does listen to that. There's been a fight right now about the Department of Defense paying to send pregnant service members to different states that aren't like ours, that don't ban abortion from the moment of conception, to other states. That starts becoming a major problem for the Department of Defense to actually pull in good applicants into the military. We could see Fort Leonard would lose things.
Right.
If so, even non-economic policies can affect how Fort Leonard Wood works and thus affect our economy. Another thing that I think is really important is if we do get other economic benefit, our economic drivers, like let's say we've got the marijuana growth area in Waynesville, and I think we've got other economic opportunities besides that. We have more to offer than just agriculture. We could perform manufacturing. We've got Sign Fab that's not in Pulaski, but it's not far. We're on I-44. We're connected all the way down to Texas, all the way up to Chicago. There's no reason people could not invest in our community. But we need to make sure that we aren't just opening the door to big companies and saying, hey, come use this. We want to make sure that workers are getting that benefit. One of the stated goals of the Missouri GOP, still on their website, is to turn this into a right-to-work state, which study after study have shown 3 to 5% less total income for a state as far as their workers' wages go. And that's not just including the people that are unionized. That's just the entire state. So, being an unfriendly to union state can cause us to, maybe we'll get more businesses with lower wages where people have no choice but to stay employed in these places that they don't really want to be employed at.
And I think one thing that we could really do to help push our economy here is to help get access to more affordable and more usable healthcare. One of the reasons people leave this area is just we don't have access to a lot of things. And it's not just, oh, I don't have the restaurants.
Right.
It's, if I have an illness, I've got to go 45, 50 minutes to a hospital in one, maybe Jeff City, probably Columbia, St. Louis. And that's actually far more than 45 minutes. But best case scenario, you're looking at, if you're right in the middle of Waynesville, you got 30 minutes to Rolla, to Phelps Health, or 30 minutes to Lebanon, to Mercy, unless you're military based. If you have an emergency, you're more likely to be life flighted to Columbia than you are to get access to the emergency room on Fort Leonard Wood.
Awesome.
So I think those are some issues of why people don't want to be here that we can address statewide.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm going to limit the answers to a minute. Otherwise, we're going to be here all night.
Yeah.
I got 1,000.
I could talk to another hour on
Yeah,
that.
two lawyers talking. We'll talk forever.
That's right. All right, going right back at you, Brandon. You get the next question first. What initiatives? This is key to my heart too, because not everybody can get a job on post. Not everybody's a school teacher. Not everybody's going to have access to the high-paying jobs here in Pulaski County. So, what kind of initiatives would you consider to be implemented to enhance workforce development and skills training for residents of District 121?
There's definitely some tax benefits we can give. Instead of giving tax cuts to people that are making lots of money, if we give tax credits to people that are producing jobs, and they don't have to be like Walmart producing jobs,
right.
But it could be just, if you have under this many employees, or if your total gross product creation is less than this, so small mom and pop shops that are really trying to get up and going, giving them general tax credits, I think actually makes a more dynamic economy than, telling Walmart, hey, we won't charge you property tax for 15 years if you move in here.
Right. Like they need to cut the cost.
Yeah, they really don't.
All right, Bill. Same question. Shall I repeat it?
No, the initiatives guys supported was we had a bill for employers to have a grant. It wasn't it was a tax credit version at first, but a grant for hiring veterans. And we also in that bill was money appropriate if they hired somebody who was a felon, if they were in. There's a series of groups that they can get the money for. That was my legislation that passed. We try to have ways that make people have easier licensing, reciprocity. We've been working on that for years. They move here. Maybe they're not in the military. They're from another state, but they can more easily become a nurse or a teacher in Missouri. That seems like a good way to have access. The tax credit thing is always tricky because I'm usually reluctant to have tax credit for a certain industry or a certain type of company because I feel like that's the government saying winners and losers. I'd rather them lower the transaction costs, the barriers to entry into a market, so more people can get into it and prosper. But sometimes I feel like, and I voted for tax credits before too, and I voted against them if I felt like it was definitely the government singling out what they wanted. So was that my 1 minute timer?
That's your 1 minute timer.
Okay, good to know.
Good to know. You hit it on the mark. So thank you so much. Education and school funding. Bill, this goes to you first.
Yeah.
How do you prioritize funding for public schools in District 121? What changes would you advocate for? Before I remember, we had who's the civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army? Security Bank.
It was Keith Pritchard.
Yeah,
he's no longer though.
Yeah, but he was it, and we talked about the
teacher
funding that was coming right.
Yeah.
So my concern, I brought to his attention that some others. There's been an effort specific upon the GOP is to get rid of the Department of Education, which is where this money comes from. Now, I'm assuming there's just be another revenue stream, but that kind of drives this question.
You mean the Federal Department of Education?
Right.
Okay.
There's a drive. It's been said do away with it. And how would you prioritize funding for public schools, assuming federal funding if you get it, on what state funding?
Yeah.
And what changes would you advocate for?
So, but it doesn't. So you said it comes from the Department of Education. It doesn't. It comes from the taxpayers.
Well, sure.
They give it to the Department of Education.
Yeah.
They filter it with strings back to the states.
Yeah, go through the Treasury.
So a lot of people would feel like it'd be easier if you just made it go direct. Like I feel like even Missouri, if that money went directly to schools,
Right.
and there wasn't a bureaucratic thing that's like making teachers' life harder, that might be a more efficient way to have better outcomes.
One rule of government: we're effective. We're not efficient. And that's a rule. That's a rule I've lived. I've been a bean counter for years.
And sometimes they're neither, and occasionally they're both. Right? It just kind of depends.
They spend that money. Let me say that.
Yeah, no kidding. So I think we've increased public education appropriation every year I've been in the legislature. The raw dollars for public education's gone up. It's got to be a big priority. It's the future of our kids. We want to pay teachers more. I voted to raise teacher pay, but sometimes there's a bill that has a big fiscal note and has some sour stuff in it. And if it's a 200-page bill, I've been looking through more and going, hey, I like that. I like that for schools. I like decoupling enrollment and attendance for funding that gives schools more flexibility. Then I find something here and I go, hey, this is bad for schools or parents they don't like. So I've just tried to say, hey, it's a priority to give more money to schools. I want DESE out of the way.
Right.
I want school boards to matter. I want teachers to teach and not spend all their time filling in databases and paperwork. Just let them teach students.
Right.
And, kind of maybe get the state and the federal government a little bit out of the education and let our community just raise these kids, teach these kids, and prepare them for the future.
I didn't have to budget. Thank you so much. Brandon, your same question?
Yeah, so actually Missouri's, I think, one of 22 states that fund the way we do, where most of our funding comes from the local tax base rather than the state. Over 51% of what you get isn't from the Fed or even from the state. I think it's like 60% come from your local taxes. That really hurts small communities, not so much Waynesville where we represent, but like Dixon where he grew up. The tax base there is just not big enough to support students to the funding that you get in places like St. Peter's up by St. Louis, or Lee Summit, or Blue Springs in Kansas City. Those are some of the best public schools in the entire state, and the reason are they have this giant tax base. So kids who cannot control where they're born or where they live, they have absolutely no authority on that, are treated differently due to no fault of their own based on where their parents have a job. And so a kid living in Dixon is going to have far less resources than a kid in St. Peter's because we've decided, we can just let the local tax base do that. So I would actually look towards proposals of putting us on board with other states that makes it basically state funding.
It's just to centralize the funding for schools.
And then give it to students, or give it to districts on a per student basis. So if you have 100 kids in your district, you're getting the same amount of money that a 1,000 school district
because I imagine Swedberg, being the smallest of the small, their tax base is just...
And this actually, it doesn't just solve problems for rural areas,
Right.
It solves problems for the inner city too. I grew up in the suburbs of Kansas City, and you knew you didn't want to go to Central School in Kansas City because they didn't spend the money they needed to on their schools.
That's a minute.
All right.
I'm going direct question right back to you, Brandon. Are you for using taxpayer dollars in charter schools?
No.
Or against?
No.
That's it. That's all I need, yes or no. Mr.
Yeah.
Bill.
No, we do. They're called public, but the statute calls them public charter schools. And the charter school teachers pay into the public teacher retirement system. So under the law, they're public charter schools. Now, whether or not those charter schools represent that community or are good to the community, but they are part of the public school system by statute. And in fact, we tied the funding of public charter schools to the foundation formula in a bill just a couple years ago. So they're part of the same retirement system, and they have. I kind of want private funding, but it's part of a public school system because they're called public charter schools.
Are they religious in nature?
No, charter schools and parochial schools are two different things.
Okay.
They're different. So if you're talking about whether or not we use private money for parochial schools, I did vote against the bill last year that did the tax credit for
Right.
giving money. But that schema, even the ESAs, is not a voucher system. It's a tax credit. It's a tax credit if you give to a fund, and then the fund gave a scholarship to a student. And the only addition I had to that bill when it came up in 2021 was I requested a tiered system where the scholarships went to children that had more need first. But it's a privately funded system. The public dollars came when they got a tax credit for when they donated to the nonprofit. They got a tax credit for donating the money, just like
Right.
you gave to a charity. Then they gave a scholarship, and they could use that scholarship for public school, charter school, private school, or homeschool.
Any follow-up, Brandon?
So what I'll say is we're kind of in the beginning stages of where Ohio was. I don't know if you read ProPublica's report that Ohio basically is now, with public tax dollars, funding the building of private religious schools. The voucher system is something that they're trying to push here in Missouri.
Right.
I think that you have a right to send your kid to private school, but the investment that we put into is into public schools. And I think what will eventually happen in private schools is that kids that don't meet the mold of what these private schools are, that they don't get a choice. So small community areas, if our public schools are gone, we don't get school choice. An area like this is not going to do well. Now, I do note that the bill that got passed that it's a credit and not a voucher. I think a family of 4 can make up to $94,000 and still get it. I'm a family of 5 and I make less than that, and I would qualify for it. I don't think it's something that I should get. I don't think I should be paid to send my kids somewhere besides public schools. The public school system is one of the best investments, one of the best things that the United States has ever done.
Thank you.
Yeah, because it's such a complicated issue. I'm pro public school. I like our public schools. I don't want to take them away. I don't want to take money from them. I think that a parent can decide homeschool or private school. The last bill this year I voted against, and so they're the school choice and the public school people. They don't know where I land because I'm just reading it and I'm going, is this good or bad, I think. But this last year I voted against it because the fiscal note was too big. I didn't think it was there. And I thought that it hurt homeschool families in Missouri. And I want people to have the right to homeschool. So, I don't, it's not that I'm pro or against anything. I'm trying to look at the whole picture, read each bill. But the school choice that I like is if you want to go to private school, if you want to homeschool, it's up to the parents, I think. So
I guess my only concern about the homeschooling is the checks and balances. How do you check the qualifications of who's doing the teaching?
Yeah.
If you got a third grade dropout teaching homeschool and just doing it for the vouchers and the benefits, I mean, there's got to be kind of a system to protect the investment of the taxpayers if we're supporting what taxpayers.
So I will say with the homeschooling, the vouchers aren't going to like pay parents. So the voucher system, even in Ohio, isn't that crazy.
Well, well, that's good because I mean I'll admit my negligence is I'm not that informed on the matter, but it's just a concern that bubbled up right to the top.
It's a legitimate concern. Some of the worst cases that I've ever heard about in the criminal justice system do come from children that are homeschooled, but there are also children that are homeschooled that have excellent educations.
And there are children who are abused in the state's custody, in foster care, and in the school system. Yep. Some of the homeschoolers they didn't want they didn't want to qualify for the scholarship because they felt that would lead to religious discrimination and the government saying what they taught. So they just kind of want to be left alone. And that's what my kind of thought is now too. I'm like, if you just want to be left alone, you could be left alone. We want to make sure there's not child abuse, but you have a right to homeschool your kids.
Thank you so much. We're going to switch to healthcare access and affordability. Who went last?
It's his turn.
It's his turn. Bill's turn. You get to go
turn.
first.
Yeah.
What are your plans, if any, for expanding healthcare access for residents in District 121?
Yeah, I went last Saturday. I went to speak to the Missouri Medical Association. I got the Champion of Medicine Award for advocating it. And the initiative that we're going to have, and I don't know what you think about this, Brandon, that we'll work on, is doctors come out of medical school first as there's a crisis of finding them. They sign these lifelong no-competes with hospitals, and they can never go out to St. Robert or Dixon and start the family practice again. So there's this massive consolidation of healthcare, just a few companies' healthcare networks. So there's a lot of things. I mean, I can answer this question for an hour, but one thing that we're looking at just this week is figuring out ways for doctors to break out of this consolidation of healthcare and get back to Dixon, Missouri, and Crocker, Missouri, and have these small-town doctor clinics again. That's something we want to work on. So that it's not that we don't want every type of agreement. The covenants are something I worked on too, but we just want to make sure we have doctors that have access into the system, and that doctors can go break these businesses off from hospitals.
I think that's actually a really great idea. One that admittedly I hadn't thought of.
I got to pause real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we signed some agreement.
Yeah. No, non-competes can be absolutely destructive. My cousin is a doctor, and he was in Nebraska, and he went all the way to Virginia because of his non-compete. So there's another Midwest state losing what I thought was a really great doctor, but I'm biased. It's my cousin. But another thing is I think that working on either some sort of either tax credit or grant to bring doctors to these local areas. It's not incentivized to come here, unfortunately. The pay is usually not as good as you can get in the city. You don't have the amenities of the city.
And you don't have the malpractice insurance covered.
Well, yeah, there's that too. But like one of the biggest issues is just finding housing. And I do think that if we helped these I say kids, but they're 25, 27 years old. They're ready to put down some roots. If we help them do that, their roots can be here, and they're not looking to go off to the next place. So when we've got these kids that are in residency and they're in their internship, helping either supplement their rent or hopefully get them either low or 0% or zero down payments onto houses. Like one of the reasons I stayed in this area is because I had a house.
You're a movie buff, right? Remember that Doc Hollywood?
Yeah.
That man, what's it?
Michael J. Fox.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right,
I
yeah.
went to a small town, you know. I still remember my hometown doctor. He smoked a pipe, and I can still remember the smell of the doctor's office. I still remember that personalized small town doctor, knew everybody's name, delivered half the town. And maybe they could just get the major corporate offices to serve as the base, satellite offices, smaller offices, who knows. I cut myself off on that one. I don't know how that happened. I'm in charge here, I thought. No, maybe not. Anyway, we're going to take a break for a commercial break.
Okay.
Stand right back. Stay tuned, everybody.
Yeah, there's just, when you're talking.
Are you in need of legal assistance? Look no further than the Prue Law Office. Our experienced attorneys specialize in family law, criminal defense, and personal injury cases. We are dedicated to providing personalized and compassionate representation to our clients. Located on the square in Waynesville, just across the street from the courthouse, call us today at 573-774-6444 or by email at pruelaw@aol.com for a free consultation. Prue Law Office, your trusted legal partner in Waynesville.
I wonder who that Fowler photography guy is. Probably a bum. He just happens to have a studio up in his garage. And you need a new picture for yours anyway, Bill, for your profile.
I need a new profile picture?
Yes, you do, but badly.
It looks look ugly?
I ain't going to say that on camera.
Well,
let the honest be the judge of that. Or maybe there's no help for you.
which profile picture do you mean?
The representative page.
Oh, like on my state page? A lot of people say I lost weight since I got elected, so.
I wasn't referring to that, but anyway.
I
I think so too.
I shaved this morning. This is how much man I am.
That's your 12 o'clock shadow. Took out 12, 5, 6 o'clock shadow.
Yeah.
All right, back to healthcare. We're going to talk about Brandon, you're up. How do you intend to improve mental health services and addiction recovery programs in our community?
So one of the things to do is work with our insurance companies. Right now, like Missouri's main provider, Aetna, is fighting with Mercy. Well, there's only like 2 providers in this area. So getting involved in that, I think at this point, is a state interest. So making sure that our people that are insured don't suddenly go out of network at places that they've had access to for years. Getting involved in that is important. Mental health is, again, attracting them here. I'll say that I've got family that have had psychiatrists, psychologists, and a lot of them leave. A lot of them are here for a year or two, and then finding a new one, sometimes you're just left out on your own. So one of the big things that we need to focus on is retention.
Right.
Exact policies on how to do that are to make this area a place that is good to live in, and highlight that it can be a place that accesses other areas. I think one thing that would be great, and it's a long-term project, but to get easier transportation to St. Louis, to Springfield, to the places that people want to go to, but maybe don't want to live.
Right.
Know? Like I would love to have access to St. Louis and not have to drive the 2 hours.
That's your 1 minute.
All right.
I do have to interject something. Just you bring it up. It's a short nationwide shortage of some of the trades. Neurologists, for one. I've experienced that with the VA and everybody else. 6-month wait. That's on the civilian side going through the VA. It's just there's so few out there that want to specialize, so it's harder and harder to get those specialized clinics. But go ahead, Bill, you're up.
So you had mental health and addiction. One thing we're not doing mental health is we're not eliminating stigma with people getting help and getting treatment. And we have these barriers even when people apply for medical school or professional school. Have you ever been mental health treated? Have you ever whatever? And so a lot of people are afraid to go get help because the state even puts in these questionnaires and these checks. And if you're somebody who had an emotional crisis or you need mental health treatment, it doesn't mean you're a defective person. It means you're a person.
Right.
And we just say, hey, everybody getting help is what we want you to be able to do, and stop making that a negative thing and stigmatizing that. In addiction, people who are struggling with addiction, they are not bad people, I don't think. I think they're people who are trapped and there was pain and there was hurting. And then people get maybe it was a drug addiction, maybe it was alcohol addiction. There's all kinds of addictions people use to medicate themselves, and they're stuck in it. So we need to help them get set free. with these more rehabilitation centers. We try to get treatment court commissioners in the last budget to add that into the process and just help people kind of break free from that trap. But that's a stigma too. They go, "Hey, you're a bad person because you had addiction." No, it means that you're a person. We need to help you,
Right.
set you free, and help you have a life and a future. That's what it's all about for me. So
Thank you. Any follow up?
It goes into one of the other subjects, but if we want to remove stigma, and I had this conversation with Judge Hickle when we were working on putting that proposal that eventually Don
Pull the
moved
mic
up.
a little forward. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So back in December.
Angry listeners.
Sorry. Back in December, Judge Hickle and I and a lot of other people, I think you might have been there for a little bit, or maybe it was just Don that came, met down at the basement of the courthouse, and we talked about what can we do, and everybody danced around stigma. But one of the things we do is people are addicted to drugs. We give them the worst stigma possible in this society. Well, the second worst. We call them a felon. There is one worse, sex offender, but they become felons.
Right.
They lose tons of rights. They lose respectability in society. And we're making them felons over. Some of them are felons over drugs that. I mean, I've seen people become felons and go to prison over Xanaxes.
Wow.
And yeah, you can abuse them, but you go to prison for 7 years for having 5 Xanax as much as you will for having fentanyl.
That's your minute. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Brandon. Both of you. You're being very cordial. I appreciate that. I got gloves. in case we need to get gloves on. Now that's a hot button topic. This is the moderator's fancy here. Gun control.
okay.
What, Bill? You go up. What's your stance on gun control measures?
No new gun control measures. I think that violence and people hurting people is a human heart issue. I don't think that you make the world safer by taking freedom from people who are law-abiding citizens.
Thank you.
I actually want to increase access to guns for some people. I think it's crazy you lose a right to gun if you write a bad check that's
Right.
over $500, or I think it's $750 now in Missouri. I do think, though, that parental guidance and parental supervision is necessary. I don't know if the age is 18, but the fact that there's no age is disturbing to me.
Thank you. I can just tell you right now, we've been sitting here for 59 minutes, and my guns have killed nobody. That's all I gotta say. And we'll switch because I know that's a hot button
We
topic.
keep going.
Oh, no, I think we're both gun owners.
I think there's nothing.
Or all three of us are gun
It's-
owners.
it's
Yeah.
got- all right, abortion rights, hot topic in the public dialogue. And what's your position, Brandon, on abortion rights, and how would you approach legislation related to reproductive health in Missouri? That's a lot of words. But
So I'm voting for Amendment 3.
yeah.
I think that we trust women and doctors for the vast majority of things. I know people are worried about viability, and like somehow they're trying to turn this into a trans issue too. Right now, Missouri is forcing women with babies that are never going to actually be born alive to carry them until either the woman or the baby get so sick that one of them die. They've had 2 years to fix it. They can't. Amendment 3 is at least something.
Okay. Thank you, Bill.
I'm going to vote against Amendment 3. I think that it goes too far extreme the other direction. I think that human life is intrinsically valuable. I was reading Malcolm Muggeridge, the English poet, this morning, who said either life is always valuable in all circumstances or of no account. I don't want women to die. People always say that you at the expense of the health of the mother. No, we got to protect the health of the mother. That's got to be something that doctors are able to protect. But I think it's important that we have protections for human life, because if we devalue the life of the unborn, we're devaluing the life of all people, in my opinion.
Okay. Thank you so much. Any follow up? I'll give you a chance to follow up on that one.
I will say that being inside of another person puts you in a different position than any other human is. There's no other time that the end of your life will save somebody else's life. Like if you were to shoot me dead now, it's not going to save my mother's life.
Right.
Likewise, there's no other position that we put anybody else in other than pregnancy where we demand that you give of your body, period. Like as a father, I would give any organ, any amount of blood, but I don't risk going to prison if I decide not to.
Thank you.
And only women do in this state right now.
I'll give you one more chance for any more follow up.
I don't think that we're prosecuting women in Missouri, but I think the issue is not whether or not there's a human being there. As we discussed, is about whether or not that human beings were their protections too. And I just think that's an important value for us to affirm in the state of Missouri.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that's your key topic for Monday?
Monday, we're going to have probably a couple-hour discussion just on Amendment 3, the ins and outs. And our
At the
different
Village here in St. Robert, and
That's
we'll
right.
be actually streaming it for those at home want to watch. So, climate change. Now, this is a good one. What specific, we'll go to Bill on this one. I think, Bill, you're up. What specific actions do you believe the state should take to combat climate change, if any, and to promote environmental responsibility?
Yeah, those are two questions, I think. So there are 2 points. So climate change, the EPA regulations of emissions and stuff like that is largely preempted through interstate commerce by the federal government. But we do have some local regulations for DNR. I never call myself an environmentalist. I call myself a conservationist.
Right.
Because I think we got to be good stewards of the land. We got to be good steward. We want clean water. We want clean air. I think DNR could step up in testing air quality, whether or not there's carbon monoxide poisoning or pollution, testing our water. And if somebody asks it, I'd like to ask our universities and DNR to do that, to test water on prompt request. If somebody has water, the state provides that as a service. But I also think that, so as a conservationist, what I mean is I think that, we have a responsibility to take care of this environment and these resources that we have. And we also have responsibility, to our future generations and to make our kind of environment livable. So I'm somebody I don't like trash on the side of the road. I don't think we should have people dump it into our drinking water. I think there's a role for the state to be involved in that. And I think we should have clean air and clean water that we're drinking and breathing.
Thank you so much, Bill. Brandon?
So I agree with Bill that it is kind
Microphone.
of. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm getting bad at this. I agree with Bill that it is kind of a federal issue that the feds have kind of come in and said, hey, we're doing this. But that's because nothing we do when we put it into the air, into the water, stays here. Our water doesn't come just from Missouri. It comes all the way up from northern Canada down into here. And it will go all the way out to the Gulf of Mexico.
What's that line you heard? Everyone's downstream from somewhere.
Exactly.
Right. It's all one system.
Yeah.
And the same with our air. So, when our coal-fired power plants are putting CO2 and smog into the air, it doesn't just stay where we put it. It goes up to north of Chicago and goes into Canada. It affects everybody. The first thing we have to do is acknowledge that it's real.
Right.
I don't want to be too antagonistic to Bill because I like Bill, but last time we were together, he said, I'm voting for the felon. I don't care that he's voting for a felon. I care that he's voting for a person who says climate change isn't real. It's a hoax made up by the Chinese. Well, the Chinese are investing a hell of a lot of money into something they think is a hoax.
All right. Thank you so much. I forget my timer's going. We're having such engaging conversations. Bill, you want to follow up?
I am voting for Donald Trump. That is true.
Well, that's transparent.
Right. Yeah. No. I do think that we have an effect on the environment. I think I was actually just watching some podcasts on like when CO2 levels go up, plant levels go up, and then you look at China's pollution, like in Korea and those areas around there, how they're unchecked, and there are these folks that are they're incentivized, right? They're not bound by our treaties. But I think that the change in climate and if you go back to the Younger Dryas theory and stuff like that, there's a lot there that, the sun and their cycles, what's changing the environment. I think man is having an effect on the environment.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you should obviously not be pumping toxic waste into the atmosphere. If I think there might be an exhaust leak in my truck. I don't think me breathing that's good or that's good for the environment. But I also don't think that we can use a certain model and say, this is how we're going to take away freedom from Americans when all these other countries aren't following the same rules. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Thank you so much. Now, I do have a question for both of you. Well, I have a pet peeve. I would drive a diesel, and it's got the environmental system on it. What's it called? The extra liquid I got to put in there for the diesel because it burns off. Now, you see it all around here, these folks driving these modified exhausts, spewing out black smoke. And because we don't have motor vehicle inspections anymore, I don't believe, to check those. What's your thoughts on that?
If we should have something like what California has where they have emission standards.
Yeah.
I think there is kind of part of check on the inspection of like you're having a muffler or whatever, it's broken down. But it's not the same level as what they have in California. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. At a certain point, you get down a road where like the California rules are kind of just basically banning combustion engines.
Right.
So I think there's a balance that we need to have. And there's also kind of understanding that we want like combustion engines and diesel engines to probably still be able to operate in our state. And if we're putting a burden on an individual citizen, and we're taking away their freedom, and we're requiring them to pay a fee for another inspection, then that's got to relate to this public interest that the public agrees on, I think, at a certain level.
I understand. Thank
So
you.
I'm going to disagree on that because I think what you're specifically speaking about are these guys that get their big diesel trucks modified so they can roll coal. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
As a biker,
No, don't go. Let me interject. Don't get me wrong. Some of it's funny when they get somebody protesting on the side of the street and they gun it in that diesel smoke. It's funny, but there's got to be a limit.
as a biker, and it's hard to bike here because we don't have good infrastructure in Waynesville, St. Robert, unfortunately.
Bicycle or motorcycle?
I bicycle. Like
Okay.
I will actually.
I had to make that clear.
Yeah, no, I my wife won't let me have a motorcycle until the last kid's out of high school. But I have a special hatred for those people because they do it for libtard tears.
Yeah.
You know, I don't disagree with conservatives because I want to hurt conservatives or I think they're horrible people and I want them to feel pain. But the people that do that specific thing
For that purpose.
they will see somebody like me on a bike, and I have had coal rolled on me while I'm just riding my bike to work. Now, I don't ride to Rolla. I ride to the courthouse and then change. So if you ever see me in shorts with two backpacks, one of them's my suit and the other one's all of my cases. But no, those people, I agree that it can be a bit of a burden, but it's $8 to go get your vehicle inspected. And if we said, hey, you don't get this, you don't get to pass inspection with this modification you paid for so you can be an asshole.
And just to interject my 2 cents, over in Europe they don't have junk cars. In Germany and in Great Britain, they don't, not like we do. That should never be allowed. It's like the Chevy Chase automobiles going down there. You know, they have tight restrictions. Of course, different type of government and everything else.
Well, they pay a lot more to
they pay a lot
have
more
a
tax.
vehicle at all.
I guess I equate it to the stereos, the loud music. Now, I'm aging myself terribly. It's not speaking. I had my Pioneer 6x9s when I was in high school, Van Halen kicking. But now it's getting to that age where you can feel it 6 cars behind me. Come on. And you want to go up and say something. So I don't want to hear it. But you're afraid, consequences. But we'll digress and segue to somewhere else on that. So voting rights. Brandon, you're up. What measures do you support? You had the question.
Yeah.
You got my notes?
No, I don't. I was just going to say everybody should.
Voting rights. Anyway, what measures do you support to ensure fair voting access and prevent voter suppression in Missouri?
So I would love to see us get to automatic registration. We need to at least lower the limit or lower the barriers to getting to getting some form of identification. We need identification that is modern.
So
right?
You're saying we should have an ID card to vote? Yes or no?
Yeah, I'm fine with
Okay.
that. But we have to lower the burden that there is to do that. So that's a system that works if we give people the tools. But we just said, hey, you have to have one and expect everybody to get one.
Right.
Right now, let's say that you get arrested for not paying a ticket for your license plate being invalid.
Right.
You don't have the money to bail out. You don't have the $500 to plead guilty. So you sit in jail for a week and you lose your job, and then your landlord kicks you out because they didn't.
It just piles on.
It just piles on. But when you get kicked out, when you lose that stuff, oftentimes these people lose their birth certificates, their social security cards, and then it takes months to years to get your IDs back. And try getting a job without your social security card and a driver's license. It builds on. So unfortunately, either as a state or hopefully as a nation, we learned to start using something better than social security cards. We're using a system that was never designed as a national identification system.
That's a minute.
Okay.
But good. Thank you so much.
I think, show a photo ID to vote. I think that's important. I think only U.S. citizens should vote. I think that, the legislature did pass something a few years ago that was paid for by the state to get that ID. Even the Secretary of State's office would come to your house to help you get that ID. What we did 2 years ago was there was 2-week no excuse absentee voting before the election, as long as the voter ID law wasn't struck down by the Supreme Court. Those things were tethered together. So I think that makes sense to have that no excuse absentee. And I think, in the last couple of years, too, we've added that the county clerks can have centralized offices. It's a new addition, makes more places people can go up, but I think they got to show an ID. We got to have confidence that person's legally voting, they're registered to vote where they're voting, and that way we have confidence. And when they cast their ballot, it's not a machine. We don't want electronic machines. I think that's rife with problems, and both Republicans and Democrats noted that. There's a paper ballot somewhere that they fill in, and they have confidence that the person they voted for that's counted accurately and fairly.
Okay, thank you. Brandon, needs follow-up?
I like paper. I would say that I do think that we should be able to have affidavits for the people that are in situations where they don't have access to an ID.
Explain that.
So you can basically sign an affidavit giving far more information.
Okay, gotcha.
So because there are people that are in these situations, or there are people that have recently moved. I had people. I did an event last weekend and the weekend before last. They're like, "Hey, I just moved. What do I do?" I'm like, "Well, you have until the 9th to change your registration, or you need to get an absentee ballot." But people move in between October 9th and November 5th. There's a way to make sure these people vote where they want to be voting.
Right.
Vote only once, and there won't be fraud without just being so restrictive. There are other states that have same-day registration and voting. We can do that too.
Right. Now, here's a question. In their amendment on the ballot, no legal immigrant or no immigrants, or what's it? No, only U.S. citizens can vote.
One prong of
I'll let
Amendment
him
7.
go that one first.
Yeah, Amendment 7 has 3 components. Only U.S. citizens. The plurality winner becomes a nominee, and there's not a ranked choice system.
Right.
That's what Amendment 7 basically says on the ballot.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood it right. Thank you. All right. I think we're public safety and policing. Yeah, I heard that right. Public safety and community policing. We're going, Brandon, you first. What strategies do you propose for improving community relations with law enforcement in District 121?
So I'd like to see, and I talked with Miss Utley about this when she came to the Democrat meeting last week. I'd like to see statewide the end of some of the statutes we use for what's called a pretextual stop. You'll have officers pull over cars that look like they've got a poor person in it for a fishing expedition. And what that is it's either, you crossed the fog line.
Right.
You're not, actually causing any risk to anybody. Everybody crosses the fog line, but I'm going to pull you over and then I'm going to search your vehicle. Or your license plate is dirty. Or one that I really can't stand, your license plate lamp is out. All of our license plates for the last 20, 25 years have been reflective. When you shine a light on that, you can't tell if that light is on or not because it's so reflective, the material it's made out of, you can't see the little light under there. It's just the headlights and it flashing back at you. It's still...
Let me interject something. I just want to count your time. But is there a rule on the books that says you got to have a lamp?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would like to see that gone.
Okay, I see.
Because it's used all the time for pretextual stops. And pretextual stops create this feeling, and we see it in Missouri. You can look at when we kept statistics. I think our latest Secretary of State has tried to stop keeping the statistics because they look so bad. But our minority individuals get pulled over at a much higher rate in Missouri. Now, fortunately, it's not as big of an issue here in Pulaski.
Right.
But we have a large minority population, and they don't just stay in Pulaski. So they shouldn't feel unsafe driving up to St. Louis. They shouldn't feel unsafe driving down to Springfield. Fortunately, I do think, and I've seen a couple officers that no longer work in this area that also had that problem. I think Pulaski's done a pretty good job of trying to get the racist part out of this area. But we need to work on it on state, and one way that we could easily do that is get rid of pretextual stops, which means these... Like we already do it with seatbelts.
Sure.
Seatbelts is not a primary stop. We actually lose money. We choose not to take money from the federal government because we've said we're not going to let cops pull people over for just not having their seatbelt on. It's a $10 ticket still in Missouri.
1 minute.
So, yep, that's...
All yours.
I'm supportive of law enforcement, first responders. I got endorsements of fraternal order police and state firefighters. I want them to be safe. I want them to do their jobs and help keep people safe. I think that I'm a constitutional conservative, too. That means not just the First Amendment, religious liberty, the Second Amendment, but the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments, due process of law, the requirements for probable cause and search warrants. And good officers are not happy with officers who don't follow the constitutional law. So there's got to be accountability for police officers. I think going out in the community, doing town halls, talking to people, making sure people know that they're protect and serve is very helpful. That families and communities can engage with law enforcement and help them keep each other safe. But everybody, whether it's me as state rep, whether it's police officer, whether it's a judge, They got to follow the Constitution. The Constitution forbids perpetual stops. There's got to be reasonable suspicion, and it has these due process requirements about the clarity of the law. So we're not run by tyrants. We're not run by tyranny.
Right.
We're governed by these principles of protecting individuals' liberties.
Any follow up?
I can look up the exact case law, but actually the Supreme Court has said pretextual stops are allowed as long as you view an infraction. And you can ask any officer. You can just follow somebody for a couple of minutes and you will find something. Like I said, a license plate lamp, any of these reasons.
Just an example with the when I went to drill sergeant school, and I came back, and one of the first things my sergeant major told me when I come back after drill sergeant school, you are a honed edge. You find something wrong with everybody, because you just like a brand new police officer. There's something wrong if you look hard enough. You're going to find something.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, so that's the state of the law as far as the federal government goes. But we don't have to just give the protections that the Supreme Court say. We can require more. And I think another thing that I would love to see, because usually the thing is like, I'm going to search your vehicle now,
right.
And they call that consent. Well, I know I can say no. Bill knows he can say no. Right. We're trained attorneys. White men feel that nobody's going to mess with us because we know. But you're a kid. You're a young lady pulled off by an officer at 2 a.m.
Right.
I'm searching your vehicle now. They're not going to say no.
Your follow up.
I just want to clarify so if the officer has a motive, like I want to stop this person because whatever, we don't have a mechanism to look into their heart and see their motive. But the stop always has to be based on reasonable suspicion or probable cause. So there has to be a taillight out. There has to be speeding or crossing the line. And there has to be the subjective basis that a crime is being committed or about to be committed. And that's the standard that we have to hold officers to. But we also have difficulty saying, okay, I looked inside of your heart and I knew you had some of this bad secret motive. We have to judge the officer in each case based on the facts, whether it comported with the Constitution. But the Fourth Amendment does require evidence of a crime to conduct a traffic stop.
Right. I totally agree, which is why I say we don't give them the option.
Okay.
They lose the ability as a primary reason to pull someone over. License plate lamps.
Right.
If you got one functioning, like if you have 4 brake lights and one of them's not functioning, there's no reason you should be getting pulled over. We know you're stopping. So when I say these are policies that prevent those bad officers from even getting to engage in the activity period. We don't have to have judges looking in and making those decisions. We just prevent the stops. And that actually protects police too, because we don't need these interactions that wouldn't have occurred anyway if they weren't on these fishing expeditions. And that's where you can get some of these violence towards officers and some of these situations where we have people that are, killed because an officer engaged in violence that they shouldn't have engaged in.
One more round, Bill.
But we also can't say there's a law in the books. We're asking you not to enforce it because we think it's silly. The legislature should instead, and this is something I'm going to work on, if that shouldn't be a requirement to have the lamp back there or 2 license plates, maybe we should change the requirement so more people are driving legally and there could be a stop to begin with.
And that's what I'm talking about. But also, like I said, we have a seatbelt law on the books, and specifically in the seatbelt law, it says that it's a secondary.
Seatbelt law is secondary. So is talking on your cell phone is secondary.
Yeah. So we can have these laws where we still enforce them, but they cannot be a primary reason an officer pulls someone over.
To me, a little bit too comes ownership on the individual. Ignorance of the law does. So there's some give and take. I guess what I'm trying to say. It's my responsibility to know the law. If I'm going out there, if I'm boater law, if I'm fishing, stuff like that.
Sure.
This kind of segues into constitutional sheriffs.
Okay.
And in my discussions with the sheriffs, each of the candidates during the primaries, and a couple of times since, I'm gaining a little bit of better education and edification on a constitutional sheriff. But I'd like to hear each of your definitions of a constitutional sheriff, and what does that mean in today's state of affairs? Bill, I'll ask you to go first.
Well, different sheriffs have a different definition, and they're different versions of the constitutional sheriff bill. So if you mean a sheriff that's above the Missouri Constitution or above the law or above the federal Constitution, that's not the case. They have to be subject to law just like all of our officials are. But I do think that I have supported legislation to say the sheriffs are not, and it's from various cases, they're not able to be commandeered by the federal government, that their duty is to follow Missouri Constitution and Missouri state law. They're not subordinates of the hire ATF. I think that's correct. But I also don't think we want to make any position, a sheriff position, so its wording is careful, any position, sheriff, state rep, anybody, above the limitations on power that are put in the state and federal constitutions. We all have to be subordinate to that. But the Missouri is not a subdivision of the federal government, it's a division of government. So horizontal and vertical federalism, the division of power between the states and the feds, is something that I think is very important. But I also don't want to write a language that makes anybody not subject to the limitations and the need to honor individual rights that are found in our constitutions.
Supremacy lies with the federal government, yes?
The Supremacy Clause says that the Constitution is a supreme law and the laws in furtherance thereof.
Okay.
So what the Supremacy Clause does, it says the Constitution's the top.
Right.
And the Constitution divides power between the enumerated powers of Congress. And then the 10th Amendment says everything not identified belongs to the states, like family law, property law, titling. So what the Supremacy Clause really does is says nobody trumps the Constitution. What the Constitution does is it divides power so there's not a concentration for tyranny.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Brandon.
So, it depends on how you're defining it.
They were all different, I guarantee.
They are all different. General police powers exist at the state level, not at the federal level.
Right.
FBI, ATF, all of those exist under different legal theories that have advanced their power throughout, as our federal government has really gained power over the last 250 plus years. But what I'll say is I would ask people that are constitutional sheriffs, if they're going to have their cake and eat it too, because these are the same people that will complain to no end about sanctuary cities. Oh, well, these sheriffs, these police aren't holding people for ICE. Okay. That's all a sanctuary city is.
Sure.
Is a sheriff or a police station that says, we're not going to hold them, we're not going to pay, you need to come get them, or we're letting them go. That's what that is. We're not going to send our officers on ICE raids. So if we're not sending our officers on ATF raids, if we're not sending them to enforce federal laws, we need to be consistent with that.
Well, I guess I should caveat my statement, or the question was that one of the biggest arguments or most sensitive topic regarding the constitutional sheriff belief system that I've learned is that it's against Article 2 of the Constitution, gun rights. And they'll say, I'm going to stand between you and the federal government if they try to take your guns. And I said, well, and the argument or the debate became between a few of us was, well, who we want as a sheriff that believes they're a constitutional sheriff and has the authority to interpret the law and enforce only the laws that they feel are not against their political dogma or their belief system or something like that, rather than all the law. And they literally had most of the candidates tell me, well, if I don't feel like enforcing law, I really don't have to, especially if I'm not funded, I don't have the resources, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of a scary question in some cases, especially when you consider most of the sheriffs in the county and the state don't even have nothing but a high school education, much less the political theory to interpret the law and stuff like that. So that's where I should have segued into that a little bit as far as the way they are arguing.
So our system's all about the division of power.
Right.
Somebody who's writing the statutes, somebody who's enforcing it, somebody who's interpreting it. We want to be very careful that we don't invest the ability to say what the law ought to be, how I enforce it, and whether or not it applies in this case into one individual office. So, but I do agree. I mean, Second Amendment Preservation Act is something we could talk about. There's cases that go back, a long way about how the sheriffs they don't take orders from the ATF, right? They don't work for them. They work for the state. But to me, it's very important again that just like I'm not out arresting people,
right?
Right. But the police aren't out saying, well, I don't agree with this law. This is what the law ought to be. That's why we have to divide power between these offices. Right. And I do what the decisions people elected me to do, and the sheriff the same way.
So you're Brandon, basically work with the officers, get feedback, and maybe develop or revise existing laws, so it makes more appropriate sense.
Yeah, that's my job. I go I talk to police officers, I talk to defense attorneys, I talk to citizens,
right?
And I go, what's working, what's not,
right?
And we try to make it so it's fair from everybody's point of view. They're able to do their jobs. We have a functioning society.
Would it be the asinine of foolishness to say there's not some stupid laws on the books?
There are stupid laws on the books, and they're just as appropriately enforced as the quality of people enforcing them.
There's a lot of ridiculous laws on the books, and but the thing is we're going to disagree about what some of them are. but they're on the books.
But there's a process if you have that disagreement. But you can't have an individual in one county stand high upon the mountain with his flag in the air saying, I interpret the law, and I'm going to interpret it this way. That was my concern, because it could be the village idiot we elected to be sheriff, not knowing any better, and all of a sudden this person sending feet on the desk. We're not doing that.
Well, I agree. And we can look back at history. This is not the first time this has happened, not just at sheriffs, but at the governor level. We've had governors that have basically pulled an Andrew Jackson and said, let the Supreme Court enforce their ruling. And we've sent National Guard troops in to, desegregate schools.
Right. True.
And we look back at that now and say, look at that racist, horrible governor. But there's other things that we've let governors do that we were like, well, of course they're going to do that. Even though the federal government, I can disagree with what Biden's doing at the border and still say, well, the federal government gets to decide what happens with the border, because that's the law of the land, and who comes in and comes out of the country is literally something that's decided at the federal level. And yet we applauded these governors that did that. Our own governor was like, we're going to support Greg Abbott.
Right.
Well, it's not as black and white as looking back at the 60s and looking at a governor that's screaming segregation now, segregation then, segregation forever, and refusing to desegregate his schools. But it's the same thing of ignoring the federal government on something that the federal government explicitly had powers on, and arguably very much has more power, because the federal government has always had power in deciding who does and doesn't come into the country.
Great series to watch, John Adams, The Formation of the Government. I don't know if you've watched it.
On HBO?
Yeah.
It's been a while, but yes, Paul Giamatti.
Bill, please go ahead.
No, I will say I agree with President Eisenhower and Kennedy's use of the military to enforce civil rights, because there's a statutory provision about that provision, and Reagan said as much. The military could to enforce rights identified by the Supreme Court. When I was in state con law, the professor asked who interprets the Constitution, and I said everybody who swears an oath to uphold it. So I think there is some room to say, the sheriff swears an oath to the Constitution to uphold the law, the governor does, the state rep does. There's room for that person to say, okay, what is my duty here? Because some things are nebulous, what the right thing to do is. We just want to be careful that we don't imbue too much power in one person.
Right.
Because even if they go, hey, I'm so good, I'll never abuse it, once we start concentrating power, it's going to lead to abuses, I think.
I absolutely. I agree with you on that. Brandon?
The other thing I would say is, like you were talking about this being a gun control issue, and I do think that really kind of this is a mess the Supreme Court created over the last 15 years. I think they should have stopped at D.C. versus Heller. Said the federal government can't make gun regulations, but it's left to the states. When they expanded the Second Amendment, which had never been applied to the states, and then they expanded it under City v. Chicago.
McDonald.
Yeah, McDonald's.
2010s.
Yeah, it was.
And to our audience members, we have two lawyers talking lawyer talk. So just,
Sorry.
Try to keep up if you can, or get your Google out, because they blew right past me.
So basically, the Second Amendment didn't apply to the states until the last 15 years.
How do you mean the Constitution, the Second Amendment, did not apply to the states when it's
Incorporation or
Yeah, you want to do incorporation?
So the Bill of Rights are the rights against the federal government. They're negative rights to prevent the federal government from something. The 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868 or passed in 1868, says no state shall deprive anybody of due process or equal protection. So over the years, the courts have said, what's due process? It's the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment in Gideon, right, versus Wainwright. And then in 2010, in McDonald, Chicago, opinion that was authored by Anthony Kennedy, I think, it said the Second Amendment is incorporated onto the states. So if a Second Amendment, and a lot of scholars had felt that way for a long time, but that's the first court ruling that says the 14th Amendment's prohibition against violating due process means a state can't violate your Second Amendment rights.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So
Law school.
Law school.
Let's go.
Yeah. But before that, and some of them actually still don't technically apply. So the Eighth Amendment, part of it has never actually been incorporated into state.
I need to study my Bill of Rights.
The Furman and Lockwood death penalty cases is an incorporation of the Eighth Amendment in part. Yeah.
In part, but not in total. So
that's right.
One of the big things we have right now is not so much the cruel and unusual punishment and death penalty; it's bail.
Speaking of casinos, what a great segue. Yes or no, Brandon?
Morally, I don't care.
Right.
People are betting. I think it can be destructive. I think we need to have a plan for when it destroys lives.
Right.
I also really don't think that the government should be doing much as far as preventing it. It's obviously happening in other states. I don't believe the funding is going to go where they say it's going to go. I think there will be a shell game with the money. And because of the definitions, I think we should leave it to the
So
legislature.
if I understood you right, if there's checks and balances and protection measures to protect well, my first thought process was the elderly, because I just had firsthand experience with a friend of mine and his mom. But go ahead. What do you say?
No, the leave it with the legislature is right, because we should work out a scheme and compromise and system of regulation that we think is most beneficial and assures the money goes where we want.
Right.
I'm interested in other ways to fund education besides property taxes, because I don't want to put senior citizens and people on pensions against our schools. I want more ways to fund, especially if we go through an economic contraction. But I'm afraid I've also been thinking a lot about the moral hazard of having people bet on their phones about 2 casinos at the lake, and if we're not having people be protected by that, and we're using working class people and the poorest of the poor to have them kind of gamble their lives away. So I want to consider that too.
You go to the casinos, you see that one-arm bet, they're just lined up.
Oh,
Just lined up. And my concern, and we're quote-unquote the Bible Belt. And I'm not a practitioner of the arts, but I can say I know what it says. Yet we use the argument that it helps our education, but didn't we just have a huge budget surplus that we did something else with? We could have used for education.
We did give some more money to education, although there's a lot sitting in DESE that they were sitting on, but a lot of that was federal dollars that are going away. So even though this is a misnomer, we think that because our revenues are going up, that the state has more money. But as inflation increases, everything's going to cost more, including the expenditures of the government. So it's not like we actually have more money. It's just like there's more dollars.
Sure.
So we have a serious long-term problem about our fiscal health of our state, I think.
So obviously, as a beneficiary of the marijuana tax, I do think when we increase revenue, it can help. It's helped the Missouri public defender system.
Right.
And that was something that has been very beneficial to our system.
I guess mine goes at what cost?
Well, honestly, betting is something we already do. We made that decision when
we commit abortions. We commit crimes. It don't mean we should still do it.
Well, I don't disagree, but when it comes to state regulation on this, like why is the state, saying, okay, gambling is moral when it's on a river, it's immoral when it's at a gas station? I hate those things.
Oh, I mean,
I hate going into
as an ex-smoker, you just see the rings.
Yeah. I hate going into not Oasis because I don't go there very often, but the place right up on the Waynesville exit. I can't think of it right now, but they've got all of those machines that are gambling, and nobody's enforcing getting rid of those. Yeah. Like why do we have slot machines in our gas stations?
Right.
There's a slot machine in the Buckhorn gas station.
Bill?
Because I filed a bill on that topic for a couple of years. I'm going to file it again next year. People scratch their heads like, why would Bill, ultra conservative, file a bill like that? And I thought there was a real issue with what is the law on pre-revealed machines on regulated markets, and they proliferated everywhere. So it's okay. It's like, okay, how do we do with them? What are the rules? What are the taxation issue? And it was all, or VFWs. It was our American Legions. It was every convenience store in the state now, at bars and restaurants. So I just thought, okay, there's a real issue about what's legal and not. There's an issue about if it is going to education, is it going to veterans programs? Is there a constitutional way to do that? So I delved into that issue. I didn't realize how complex it's going to be between the casinos and the Cardinals and the Chiefs and the Royals and sports betting. But I just try to get involved and be like, okay, what makes the most sense for our area, our community? Right. So that's why I'm involved in that issue, and I'm going to work on that again next year about what does the regulation look like? What does the taxation look like? So. And
I literally, yesterday, I actually dug in deep and tried to find a morally acceptable excuse for casinos, for where we are today as far as the Bible Belt. Now, I'm not a practitioner, but it's just I found it amazing that it was such a strong argument for it because of the dollar signs, quote unquote, going to schools.
Well, I don't consider gambling something that is inherently immoral. I think the problem is that just like any other addictive behavior, it can cause people to make horrible decisions.
Yeah, it goes back to accountability too.
Yes. I think that I don't want to see us saying this behavior is moral here, but not moral here.
Yeah.
And then also, like, why is it a constitutional amendment or a petition on? We have 5 casinos in St. Louis, 5
Right.
casinos in Kansas City. We want 2 at the lake. I don't want them at the lake.
Yeah.
But I really think that should be a local decision if the people at the lake want it. Now, if the city itself wants to say, we don't want this here, these giant corporations that are going to suck money out of the community.
That's my big another fear. It's just going to be a black hole of where the money goes.
That's my big concern. The moral part of it, I'm not worried about. I don't think that's really something the state, because legitimately the person you're harming, unfortunately, is yourself. Maybe your family by hurting your funds. But again, that's a personal responsibility decision. And
But it becomes a burden upon the taxpayer when we got to bail them out.
well,
With WIC and food stamps and the what's it called, the
I'll tell you
Pets
that
Off organ sponsored programs and stuff like that.
as far as getting on WIC and food stamps and all of that, one, it's a small part of the Missouri budget. It's a small part of even the federal budget. I was on WIC and food stamps. Actually, even as a Missouri employee, my first year as a public defender, I got paid so little money that my wife and I were pregnant with our 3rd child. She qualified for WIC and Medicaid. So I'm not gonna worry that, like, oh, there might be some kids that end up having to have food stamps because we let gambling occur.
Let me interject a question. I got a question from Jesse West. How many jobs would the one casino create? I think it's hundreds of jobs is what they're advertising. Do either one of you know?
I don't trust job projections. I really don't. They're gonna say whatever they want, but the truth is like, if we're just concerned about jobs and we want jobs to come in, we should look at what other things that we can
Manufacturing.
Yeah, like let's make something.
Yeah.
You know, let's
I gotta agree with Trump on that. We gotta go back
Build
to
in
making
America,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, it would be
Go
nice
ahead.
to build things.
No, go ahead. I just want to give context or some background on the casino at the lake. So a few years ago, the Osage Nation bought this land, and they wanted to transfer it to the federal government, and been asking the governor to do so. And then there were locals who felt like that there was an issue of not sales tax collected. That wasn't the development they wanted. So they started an initiative to start their own casino. And there might end up being 2 casinos, the Osage Nation's and theirs. And it has to be a constitution, which I'm not saying I'm for it. A lot of locals don't want it. I'm just going to give like why it's on the ballot, even though I'm probably not going to vote for it. There's 13 licenses in the Constitution where the casinos wrote that. They said we're limiting the span of gambling to the river ways, but they also created a monopoly that only they could have legalized gambling. And so they want to amend the Constitution to have the 14th casino on the Osage River. It would require a constitutional change, and so developers would benefit from it. So, I mean, from my point of view, a lot of people like say they don't want it, and it seems like it's kind of like, the Osage Nation went to this process, and then they kind of went around them or whatever. But that's just kind of background why it's on the ballot like that.
No, I understand. I'm saying, like, fundamentally, like, why I know.
Yeah,
I know that unfortunately we've made it part of the Constitution.
Right. No, and I agree with you too. Like, if I go, hey, I bet you $1 that I could throw this a mile. Are we committing some kind of moral terrible thing? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, are people? If I'm going to go throw my money down the toilet, can I do that? Should the government stop me? But there is just something just to think about how we're protecting people. I think, not exploiting people.
Well, I mean,
Let me chime in real quick. If anybody's got a call in, now's the time to call in. 573-408-0339. Give us a call in real quick. I can't get to all your questions before we wrap it up on chat, but thank you everybody for tuning in. Lots of dialogue. I'll let the guests here, Bill and Brandon, look at the dialogue here when they get time on the Facebook page. Lots of viewers. If you got a call in and got a question, 573-408-0339. Bill, what's your favorite movie?
Braveheart.
Brandon?
Lord of the Rings, all 3. Yeah, you can't watch one of them.
I was hoping for somebody to say Shaun of the Dead.
Classic.
That's classic, but it's just not there, top tier.
Peter Jackson's perfect trilogy.
It's the long movie, Return of the King. That's all I remember. It was
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Answer it.
Got a phone call.
Push the button.
I think so.
Okay, swipe to answer. What, yeah, no kidding.
Keep ringing. Keep ringing.
Hang on.
Incoming
Swipe
voice
up.
call
Okay.
from +1
Hang on, I can do it.
573
Hold on just a second.
337
Okay, got it.
166.
Are we there?
We did it.
All right.
Who's
only
on the
took-
line?
14 tries.
Anybody on the line?
Yeah, so, yeah. Is it 1266 last 4?
Yes, 1266.
Yeah, so question is, Bill said several times tonight that no one is above the Constitution. Yet he said he will vote for a person who believes he is above the Constitution, who tried to overturn an election, and has said in his own words, the termination of parts of the Constitution are warranted. And it's clear that he would act as if he were above the Constitution if he gets back in office. And those statements are completely irreconcilable, and an explanation, I think, is warranted.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I don't think that the president, Donald Trump, is above the Constitution. I think that I'm going to vote for him because I think there's a lot of reasons why I think he's the best person to be president out of our two choices, and that there are policies he enact that I like. And I also think that there's a real problem when the Justice Department says, "Hey, we want to prosecute somebody. We want to weaponize this process against our political enemies." There's a whole issue with that about saying, "Hey, we're going to file all these charges and all these things against somebody." The president's not above the Constitution, but the president's powers are separate and distinct from Congress and the judiciary in the Constitution. He is imbued with executive power. So, I read that book. What's the book by Bob Woodward? It's about kind of the end of the 2020 election, where General Milley is saying, if the president issues an order, you ignore it. You go through me first. What's that? You should go through me first. And so to me, that's extra constitutional because the president and the vice president are the only people that have a national electorate of all the states. So the executive power, the Constitution says the power of the executive is vested in a president. So I don't think that, I think that Donald Trump needs to be subject to the Constitution. I think us as conservatives view the Constitution as something that should subject people and have them unlimited power. But I also think that since Donald Trump was elected, there are a lot of people who were there in D.C. forever who said he can't, he's not a normal president. He doesn't get to make decisions as a president. And that is, to me, that's a way of undermining the election itself, right? That we elect somebody to have this executive power and to be subject to the Constitution, but be able to do certain things. And if Donald Trump can't effectuate things that are within the legal scope and bounds of the president, then that's to me, it's like obviating the votes of all the states, the electors, and the people who voted to select him, like they did in 2016.
Hey, thank you so much for your call. If you want to go ahead and hang that up so somebody else.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
I appreciate you calling.
know if
I do have a segue. Yes or no answer. Did President Trump lose the last election?
Yes.
Okay, Brandon, Bill.
He lost because he's not back in the White House. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean he's not Joe Biden became the president.
Did he win? Did he lose the election?
Did he lose
Yes
the
or
election?
no?
Did
Stand on the limb.
I think that? So I'll say.
Give us a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's some stuff
Incoming
that's
voice
concerning
call
to
from
me.
radio controlled
But I think
racing
he
company.
lost because Joe Biden won, and the electors came in and they voted for Joe Biden.
Incoming voice
That was the
call
election
from
in
radio
December.
controlled racing company.
Should I do whatever?
Yeah, please do. Same
Radio
thing.
control.
Jesse, we're picking you up.
Now I figured it out.
Jesse, you there?
Hey, gentlemen, how you doing?
Good. Hey, thanks for calling in. What's your question?
Yeah, good conversation tonight.
I appreciate it.
Question.
I'll take all the credit.
As a small business owner, I've tried to find the answer to this, and since it's a room full of smart people, maybe you guys can give me the answer. Why is the internet for commercial businesses twice the amount as residential and the electricity?
What a great question.
Is there something?
So I'll
law-wise, or is that just a businessism?
That is because it is not considered a public utility. It is something that is a commodity that is sold by companies. And so unlike kind of the protected monopolies that exist for your electricity or for your sewer, that the government has a lot more control over because it's a government-allowed monopoly. We've essentially allowed non-competitive territories to be carved up by these companies, and they get to write the rules because they're the only internet service provider. I mean, right now...
Right.
Who are you using now, Jesse?
So So I was with Cable America, but I'm no longer. I just think that and when I say small business, super small business.
Oh, I'm with you. I went to
Yeah.
Cable America. I got Cable America at the house, and I asked them about the business plan. It was Cable America is $100 a month for this 1 gig for my home, but it's $300 a month for my business.
Yes, sir. Yes,
So
absolutely.
so I got
and I just-
I got business from T-Mobile for $50 a month, and I get almost
Right.
I get almost 1 gigabyte.
Yeah, I just don't know. It just seems very unfair for somebody who owns a small business to be paying the same prices as, Walmart or what. You know what I'm saying? That to me is ridiculous.
I agree. There's actually been some steps to work on this to try to make these more of a utility. There are actually some cities that provide it as a utility.
Casca Sage, doesn't they provide internet in Dixon?
The co-ops are getting into internet
Co-ops
business.
are
They're
getting
doing more of
into
it, and the co-ops are really good because they're member owned. Yeah, but go ahead.
Essentially, though, we have to come together collectively
Yeah.
in some form, shape, or another, and say, like, internet is as much of a right and a necessity today as electricity and water.
As Mal Bell.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
Especially because our schools are doing it now.
yeah, and it makes sense. Actually, it's kind of backwards compared to how cities and other utilities work. Some cities, if you're a massive employer with major energy requirements, they actually charge you less for your energy than they
Well, that makes
charge.
sense, though.
Well, yeah, but so like what I'm saying though is that is something that a community can come in and decide when it's a utility
Right.
and it's a public utility. But these aren't public utilities, and the
Okay.
only way we could do that is by essentially allowing the government to come in and take control of it, and that's something we need to decide if we want to do or not.
Bill, your thoughts?
So I think that part of the issue is that they're caught between like a public service commission regulated utility, like water or electricity, and a market where there's competition that could drive prices down. So we've regulated the competition out from internet service providers, but they don't have the utility regulation of electricity, water that Public Service Commission does. So, I mean, one solution would be to regulate them like utility. Another solution would be, I hope eventually, we have the internet becomes more places where service providers can have competition.
Right.
There's more people to come in. They can say, I provide a better rate, and that'll drive down prices too.
Thank you so much for your call, Jesse. I appreciate you dialing in and listening.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
You too. Go ahead and hang that up, Bill, for me.
Yeah.
Anybody else got a call out there to make? Area code 573-408-0339. 2 calls is a record. Let's go for 3. I think they're logging off. We're going to close it out. We've been on the air for an hour and 49 minutes. We thank you guys for coming in so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
We'll see you if you guys get bored. Stop by Saturday afternoon for the debate. It'll be stellar in the garage, but you can watch it on the air.
Hey, thanks for having us on.
So
It's good to-
I got a question, and you can say no as the moderator. Bill,
No.
can Bill ask me a question, or I ask Bill a question?
Sure.
Bill, do you have any questions?
if you give me one, I'll think of something.
Okay. Mine is.
I didn't read the pre-canned question topics either, so I really had no idea because I really didn't. But
Mine's not going to be nice, but it's something I'm personally worried about.
sure.
I actually have less of a problem with you voting for Donald Trump. You said you're going to vote for the felon. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Are you planning on voting for the Christian nationalist?
Who's the Christian nationalist?
Josh Hawley. He has come out and said it. Those aren't words I'm interpreting.
He's a Christian nationalist?
He has said that.
Yeah, I'm going to vote for Josh Hawley too.
So my question is, whenever you put an adjective in front of the word nationalist, that means you're excluding anybody that doesn't fit in that category.
Yeah.
Why does 27% of Missouri and 33% or actually I think it's like 37% of the nation not qualify as an American if they're not Christian?
Okay. Can I answer your question in parts?
Yeah.
So, first of all, people have sent me articles about what Christian nationalism means, and some people have articles about some pretty nefarious definitions of it, right? That are exclusive and that are kind of hateful. Some people have definitions of somebody who's a Christian, that follow the teachings of Christ. Their definition of nationalist is somebody who says put the interest of our country before other countries. So if Josh Hawley's saying I'm a Christian and I think America first, put our interests above other countries, that's not a deal breaker for me. I think somebody can identify as a Christian and say, hey, I believe in Jesus, which, I do. I'm somebody who messes up a lot. I'm a pretty flawed human being. Just for the record, if anybody's wondering, I'm a flawed human being, but I, you know, and I read the Gospels and I'm inspired by Jesus and I want to treat people well. And I don't think that means that I say somebody who disagrees with me is somebody who's any less of a human being, any less of somebody who has rights, any less of somebody who should be protected by the protections of our country, should be free to have their own decisions in our country. See, I'm a big guy. I'm a big believer that you could say, I'm a Christian, and somebody else could say I'm an atheist, or somebody else could say I'm a Buddhist, or somebody else could say I don't want any label. And the First Amendment is really crucial to protect all of that. It's not something that government should impose on you. It's something that somebody can make their own mind up about. If we're a big enough country and a free enough country, people can go their own way. But if Josh Hawley says I'm a Christian, to me that's not saying that somebody who's not a Christian doesn't belong in America. There's a place in America for Christians to practice their faith. There's a place in America for people to say, I don't believe in God, I don't want to go to church. And guess what? The First Amendment protects you just as much.
So I think that you remember Roy Moore, right?
Yeah, the Alabama.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he ran for Senate.
Yeah, ran for Senate.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of his arguments against Cory Booker was Cory Booker shouldn't even be allowed to be in the Senate because he's not a Christian. He couldn't put his hand on the Bible and swear to. So when I hear Christian nationalists, especially from Josh Hawley, who knows what those words mean and know, like, you know.
He's went to Yale.
Yeah, he's not. He knows what those words mean, even though some people might view it in a more positive light. Who doesn't want to be a nationalist?
So you're saying Bill's an optimist?
I think Bill might be an optimist, but I worry he's far more Roy Moore and thinks that people that aren't.
I'll be honest, I was an independent as day is long, but I got to agree with Brandon on this one.
Yeah, that you don't like the term Christian nationalist. I think.
I mean, if you look at the footage, it's scary.
I think the Constitution says there's no religious test for holding office.
I agree.
And that means that to me that means the government can't say you need to be a Christian to hold office, just like it couldn't say anything else. And I believe that very strongly. But I also think when I see people say, well, this person hold my Christian value because pro-life's important to me, or they say whatever. Right. They say, I think whatever, they look in the Bible and they go, that's what I'm looking for in my candidate. Then they get to decide how to vote, how they want to vote.
Well, absolutely. It's like-minded. I agree with you that.
Well, and I'm not here to say, you know, Christian. I think Catholics, Baptists, any form of Christianity is totally fine. What I'm worried about is exclusionary. Like when somebody calls themselves a white nationalist, that means they think that people that aren't white aren't American, or they're not fully American, and that's what I worry about.
To me, I look at it as right. So when I hear white nationalist, I hear racism too. Right?
Yeah, it is oozing.
Yeah, I don't like that. I think that I remember William F. Buckley in the 1960s did a lot of work to say conservatism rejected racism and white supremacism and rejected segregation. And Buckley did a really good job, I think, of trying to say conservatism is about, you know, these like, you know, equal protection under the law and stuff like that. Yeah. And I agree with that. I don't think that we should say people who aren't Christians are not people who have just as many rights as anybody else in society. But I think it's okay to be a Christian. And if you want to use the adjective Christian, you go, I'm a Christian representative. Then if that's what you mean by it, then cool, you could say that, right? I mean, but again, like I said, even though, and I'm not one to talk because I got no room, right? I'm just trying to do the best I can as a person. But that's the way I view it. If you want to say, hey, I'm an atheist nationalist, then if you mean I'm somebody who doesn't believe in God and I like America first, then cool. If you mean that people who don't agree with me don't have rights in America, then not cool.
Yeah.
How about that?
Bill, do you have a question for Brandon?
Yeah. Man, gosh, can you ask me another question? I don't know. I don't. Brandon, you can ask me whatever you want. I like that you went out there and you ran for office. I respect that because you put your name out there, and people don't realize how hard it is to go out there and say, "Hey, I'm going to put myself out there, my thoughts and beliefs, and shape the conversation." So I'm going to give you kudos for that for sure. I hope that if I win or you win, that I'm a good representative for you, and we can still have dialogue. And I may not always agree with you, you know, but I'm going to try to tell you why I think something and how I'm trying to do the best I can. I don't know what I'd ask you because I don't really know. I mean, so you're going to vote for Lucas Kuntz?
I am. Yes.
Okay, cool. So that makes sense. You're a Democrat. I'm a Republican. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I don't really. Can you ask me one more or something like that?
No, I can't say that makes sense because
we got to cut it off.
I can't do for.
No, I just appreciate discussing with you, Brandon. And we've always had. Yeah.
We've had good.
We went back and forth. You know, we don't agree on stuff, but I've always enjoyed talking with you.
Well, I think we owe this to both the participants today. There we go. Take a bow.
Where'd all these people come from?
I know they're in the back. They're behind the curtains. But thank you so much
smokes.
for joining us. We're going to close the night out. We've been on the air for the long show ever, almost 2 hours, and we thank everybody for tagging along. Please like, follow, and share. And if you want to be a sponsor and you want to see your name and your business down there where you see it on the screen in perpetuity on YouTube, Twitter, Tango, Twitch, and all the other streams we're on right now, give us a call and we'll get your ad placed right there for a nominal fee. Of course, we can't do it for free. But thank you, Bill. Thank you, Brandon, for coming in. You guys are always welcome. Maybe we'll have that Jeopardy game. So with that, we're going to close the show.
Thank you.
Night, everybody.
Good night.